Okay.
And I'm live. And hello, everybody. I'm live, and on the phone I have Rick Gentile. Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
Yes, that's right.
Outstanding. And this is going to be a fantastic discussion just about, I would say, a day and a half now before Super Bowl. This is Friday night. NFL parties are tonight. The commissioner's party is tonight. It's the NFL Friday night parties. You may not know this, Rick, but I came to within 8 NFL owner votes of bringing the 2005 Super Bowl to Oakland. We lost to Jacksonville.
Oh.
Yeah. So I've been to 9 Super Bowls. The last one for me was Super Bowl 50 in Santa Clara, really San Francisco Bay Area, right? So,
right.
So that's... but hey, so talk to me. First of all, let's have a little fun. Are you going to watch the Super Bowl?
Yeah, of course.
Who's your team?
Well, my wife's from Philadelphia, so need I say anything more?
Right. If you want to stay married, I would say. I would think that you have some work to do.
Yeah, that sort of settles that.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, so take me through this. I read your data with interest, but let's summarize. You're basically saying that 84% of people out there will, not 84%, 54% of the people you talk to, the 760 people, plan to watch the Super Bowl, right? But that's down from 68% of 2 years ago?
Yeah, we asked the same question, that very simple question. Do you plan on watching the Super Bowl? 2 years ago, 68% said yes, and this year, 54%, which, it kind of reflects what we've been seeing for the last 2 years, a sort of steady drop in ratings and I guess one could say lack of it or decreasing interest. But it's just reflective of that phenomenon.
I'm curious because someone might, watch this and say, well, why didn't you do the intervening year, like 2016?
Oh, well, a very simple reason. While while doing the poll over the years, sometimes we alternate. Well, not all. We do alternate. Sometimes we'll do the poll the week before the Super Bowl. Sometimes we'll do the poll the week after the Super Bowl. Just to look at different things. So the last time we did the poll pre-Super Bowl was 2 years ago. It was 16.
Wow. Hey, so I'm gonna welcome my viewers. Thank you all for attending. Go CSU and everyone else. And you all know the drill. If you have a question for Professor Gentile, you can type it in the chat area, and I'll ask it. And of course, Mr. Gentile, we have a great 900-word filter, so you're in a great safe space. No worries from any of the usual trolling. Hey, so tell me, what going in? There's in research, there's always a null hypothesis, right? There's always this question or this statement of a possible outcome that you expect, like, the outcome is going to be the same or not. What was your null hypothesis going in? Did you expect to get high enthusiasm for the Super Bowl? What going in?
No, I guess what we were looking at is what really kind of what I just said, which is the ratings the TV ratings have dropped about 20% in the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the real question was, is this going to spill over into the Super Bowl? The Super Bowl has always been fairly immune from this kind of thing because it's a unique event. It's like a national holiday. The ratings are always in the 40s. And I really wanted to see, is there any way to tell whether, in anticipation, if we're going to see this trend continuing?
I have to ask a question because it seems to me that sometimes people mistake lower viewership, in other words, people just not watching television, for lower ratings. And is that, when I read it, I thought, hey, what's the clarification? Because when you say lower ratings, are you saying that the less people watch the Super Bowl and then turn to something else?
Well, look, a 43 rating means that 43% of households with televisions watch the game, are watching the game.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's not really being reflected in so much in other shows getting higher ratings. In fact, all ratings are down across the board in television. You know, there's simply less viewership of television now than in past years.
And that's
but the NFL
right.
has always
I'm sorry,
the NFL's been immune to that for the most part.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to get at because, and not, I mean, I wanted to separate the wheat from the chaff, if you will, because viewership simply means you don't have enough people watching. Period. It's not a rating, and it's not to do. I'm not. And here, my point is this. I'm just doing this for clarification because the way I do this interview is mostly you talking, but I'm only making this point because since 2011, the total number of people watching television, period, traditional television, according to Nielsen, has declined, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
so that's why. So it's not to be, and I want to be absolutely clear, I'm not trying to be critical at all. I'm just trying to separate terminologies here because...
Well, simply put, total viewership, total people watching football is down.
Yes.
We don't have to talk about ratings. It's just in terms of human beings watching television, period. But football in particular are down.
Yes. Okay. Now I can get to the next question. I want people to read your poll, of course, but for the purpose of talking about this, why is this happening?
Well, we have polled on that subject over the last 2 years, and I can tell you what results of the poll have said. When we ask people why they're watching, people who have identified themselves as football fans, when we've asked them why they're watching less football, they have cited several different options. One is oversaturation of football games with 3 primetime nights and Sundays. Matchups aren't as compelling. But the primary reason, I shouldn't say the primary reason, the reason that gets more votes than any other is the protests. And honestly, on both sides, it's a reaction to the NFL's treatment of protesting players and a reaction to the protesting players. So that has had an impact. I think the White House's attack on the players and on the league has. I'm not so sure it influenced people, but it certainly drew more attention than the protests might have on their own. But I think there's any number of reasons, and I think the brain injury news that we keep getting is a factor. So I think there's been a little bit of, and it's as I said before, the NFL has been impervious to this kind of thing over the years. Mm-hmm. But there's a number of elements, and I'm not convinced that they're all not contributing. I think it's a little bit of a perfect storm coming at the league now, and I think they've been hit on by various reasons, and people are just a little bit turned off. Having said that, there's no question that the NFL is the most popular sport in America. That continues to be the case.
We talked about this. I think you and I didn't get a chance to talk at length, but I did talk about it with your colleague. And my question is, and I'll bring it out with you, how much of this has to do with the changing demographic landscape of the United States? The record number of, and I'm going to emphasize legal immigrants. I'm not trying to introduce a political discussion here, but one thing that I noticed, I've not only been to 9 Super Bowls, I covered the NFL, and I've covered the relocation issue, is that you have a number of people. For example, I got into a car, an Uber in San Diego, and the person driving was from Argentina, and I asked her if she was aware of the San Diego Charger vote, to vote for public financing for a stadium. Now, she's a Chargers fan by her own admission, but she didn't know about the vote. And that was true for a number of people I talked to who happened to be, from other countries, but had lived in San Diego for, 10 years on the average, right? Long enough time to be aware. And I wondered if the NFL perhaps wasn't reaching this growing group of people who are more used to soccer than American football? And because I know the league doesn't have more than maybe 2 or 3 or 4 languages represented in a website, for example. I wondered if that was the problem. What do you think about that possibility?
I think it's a possibility. I would say if that were the case, we would probably be seeing an uptick in soccer ratings, and that hasn't really been reflected yet. Although certainly there's a greater investment in soccer in European football, South American. So there's people who I think are thinking like you are in the broadcast industry, saying that maybe it's time to make that kind of investment in soccer as opposed to the NFL. But I mean, that's conceivably a factor. That one of the wild card here, or the fly in the ointment, or whatever the cliche is that Fox has just made a deal for the rights, 5 years worth of Thursday Night Football rights, and they blew everybody out of the water with their bids.
Yeah.
So clearly, Rupert Murdoch thinks that this is either a growth industry or big enough that it's worth making that kind of investment.
How much of it? I know you deal with this in your great poll, but I just want to ask again for conversation. How much of this has to do with new devices, and also not just smartphones, but also platforms like Twitter? The one thing that I've observed is that it seems like the NFL's had trouble getting traction with YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook primarily in terms of finding an online outlet to show NFL games.
Yeah, they've bounced around a little bit. We actually asked the question in the poll, will you be watching? For those people who said they would be watching, the 54%, we asked, would you be watching on television or another device? And 90% said television, which is, a pretty overwhelming number. Again, though, 2 years ago, we asked the same question, and 98% said television.
Wow.
So there certainly is, we know that trend exists, that people leaving, cord cutting, people leaving traditional television to go to other ways to watch, whether it's live sports or whatever. That certainly is happening. And the NFL, is sort of in search of a streaming partner. They haven't really, as I said, they haven't really landed anywhere yet, but they've had a lot of success. But I suspect they will. I suspect that's something that, at some point they'll find that partner.
Hey, any other findings that you want to share because I'm forming another set of questions, but I want to give you a chance to talk about what to you were the most interesting findings in your poll.
No, I think I think the idea that we've come down from 68 to 54%. One of the other interesting things, we asked people of people who identified themselves as following the NFL very closely or closely, 16% of those people said they would not be watching the game.
Yes, that was
and that's
fascinating.
A significant number. That's a significant number.
And why do you think that is though?
I think it's all the things we've discussed. I think it's but it doesn't just affect the quote casual fan. It seems like it's impacting even people who have identified themselves as NFL fans. Now, it could be as simple as saying, I don't like the Eagles or the Patriots. 2 Northeast teams. I live in San Diego. I couldn't care less. That could be a factor.
Well, you're saying you actually lived in San Diego, or are you saying that just as an example?
No. I'm saying the fan could say, I'm just not interested in 2 teams from the Northeast. So I'll pass on this year's Super Bowl. Or we also asked people if the success recently, the Patriots' success over the last several years, has made them would make them less inclined or more inclined to root for the Patriots. And 20% said that they were less inclined to root for the Patriots because of the recent success. So that could be a factor as well. It's like I'm sick of the Patriots. I just don't want to watch anymore.
That's significant because if you take that 20%, it seems to match the 16%, or maybe just a little bit over it, right?
Well, again, we didn't say so will you not be watching. We said we asked about rooting interest. The question was, does it make you more inclined or less inclined, or not make any difference in whom you root for?
Mm-hmm.
So, but you could extrapolate and say, since 20% aren't rooting for the Patriots, maybe they just will find something else to do tomorrow.
Hey,
Sunday rather.
Something that didn't occur 2 years ago, but in the intervening mid-year did occur, but was on the horizon 2 years ago, was the prospect of NFL relocation. And since then, we've had the NFL approve not one, not two, but 3 teams: the Rams, the Raiders, and the Chargers for relocation. How much of your findings do you think the discord over relocation is factored in there, or could be?
Well, I think, I can't answer specifically because we didn't ask the question.
Right.
But as an observer with interest of the situation, certainly when a market loses a football team after many years, as is the case in San Diego and in Oakland, one could see that fans saying, I'm disgusted and I just don't want to follow the NFL anymore.
Yeah,
that's not an unusual occurrence. That happens in other sports when a team moves out of a market.
We have that with the Raiders in Oakland. I have people I know who simply have, a number of cases, sold their season tickets and don't watch it anymore. One has just given up on all sports because he's thoroughly disgusted with the move of the Warriors from Oakland to San Francisco, which is just across the bay. But hey, we love our city, Oakland. Another, and also then he's pissed off with the Raiders, and he's pissed off with the city for not handling it the way that he thought of. I can go on and on and on. That's not an unusual occurrence in Oakland.
Right.
But you have people,
and it's not the first time it's happened in Oakland, right? It's Oakland has lost the Raiders several years ago to LA. So yeah, I mean, I could see people in Oakland saying I've had it.
Yeah, and which brings me to this question: is it a good thing for the league to allow, considering that I found that of the top 10 teams from the perspective of merchandise sales, none of them, including the 49ers, which is one of them, have been a candidate for relocation or relocated in their history, which I thought was fascinating.
That is interesting, yeah. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I could certainly see people, as I said, people from a city that has just lost a team like Oakland, say I've had enough. I won't stand it anymore. The league has to make those decisions. Obviously, in the case of the NFL and in the case of the Raiders or the Chargers, for that matter, it's a new market in Las Vegas is more attractive, or the LA market is the second largest market in the country. If we have to have people in San Diego mad at us, oh well, we're taking advantage of the second largest media market in the country. So, those are tough calls, but the NFL is going to pick LA over San Diego every time. It's just the way it is.
You thought, made me think of another question I didn't anticipate. But before I ask that question, I want to give a shout out to Paul Dog, who I saw at the Oakland A's Fan Fest Saturday. Paul Dog writes, I have quit football altogether. Don't support a team that doesn't support our community. And he's very real about that, Rick. Paul Dog, if you have a question, type it in for our esteemed guest. I'd appreciate it. While you're doing that, I'm going to read another finding of the poll, which I think is quite interesting, and that is it says 22%, this has to do with commercials and halftime shows. 22% said they were looking forward to the game's commercials, with 61% most looking forward to the game, and 14% the halftime show. And then you write, among men, 76% said they most look forward to the game, and 11% the commercials. Among women, 47% called the game and the commercial, and 32% the commercials. And 60% of the population that you surveyed said they watch the commercials more closely than on other TV shows, which is fantastic. And a third of African American respondents said they most look forward to the halftime show. I got to ask you about that last point, since I'm obviously black. What how did that come about? Was it such an outlier that you thought, hey, I should report that more African Americans? Yeah, I'm serious. I'm curious.
Yeah, it absolutely was an outlier. It wasn't anything we anticipated. We were looking at the results. The process is we get a report with the results, and we sort of drill down.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody really coincidentally was looking at the sort of breakdown of the responses to that. We were looking at the male versus female answers, and it was a conversation between three of us. And he said, "Oh my God, look at this!" And it was the stat you just gave us. I have absolutely no explanation for that.
Yeah.
I don't know why the halftime would be more of interest. And I will say this, that, considering that we had 706 total respondents
Mm-hmm.
with a margin of error of 3.8, and probably people identifying themselves as African American, I think it was 11% or 12% of that total.
Wow.
So that's what? It's like 80 people, let's say.
Yeah.
So it's a very small sample size. It might just be an aberration. I wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't make too much of a fuss about it because of that. And as I said, I don't know. Do you have a theory? I don't.
Yeah,
I could see if it was. I could see if it was. I don't know. A hip hop artist.
Mm-hmm.
But Justin Timberlake wouldn't be the guy I would think would be creating that kind of interest in the black community.
I'm going to take a different tack. I think that the reason is because you have entertainers who reflect a popular culture, multicultural taste, that you're more likely to have African Americans watch the halftime because they're fans of, for example, Justin Timberlake. Okay, the person. In other words, it doesn't have to be black to black. In other words, Justin Timberlake doesn't have to be black. Justin Timberlake can rap as well as anyone who's black. So, it reflects, from my take on this, how multicultural our country has become, to a point where entertainers who have a black following bring that black following into the Super Bowl when they become the Super Bowl entertainment. For example, I would bet you these statistics would be the same or better if you did a poll last year, because or even the year before. I don't know. I'd like to know if you found that the year in 2 years ago, because for the 50th Super Bowl, which I attended, we had Bruno Mars and Beyonce and and Calvin Harris as the entertainment. And I mean, not Calvin Harris, but Chris Martin, as the entertainment. And originally it was supposed to be just Mr. Martin, but there was a hue and cry from the younger multicultural community. And I say that because there's an inaccurate portrayal that our country is split black and white. It's really split in terms of people who are heavily multicultural, heavily from interracial backgrounds. I mean, including marriages and godkids and grandparents and deeply mixed families who have come up generation after generation, and they're used to multicultural expression of culture. And so they said, hey, why you just have Chris Martin? And so the NFL quickly reacted, and they brought in Beyonce and Bruno Mars. But it's that that dynamic of complaint that I'm talking with you about, I believe is driving the numbers that you and I are talking about.
I mean, not inconceivable, but I'll throw another one at you.
Mm-hmm.
That suppose that multicultural population or part of the population is so turned off by the negative reaction to the protests throughout the last 2 years that they say, I don't even care about the game anymore. I'm watching for the halftime. That's all I care about.
There could be some of that. I think
I would argue that's not inconceivable.
It's not, but I would wager $1,000 that that's minimal, and that's just from my history of being a Super Bowl bidder, knowing the commissioner since '97, and just a deep knowledge of the NFL and how pop culture reacts to the National Football League. I would say that's minimal, and I really hold to the overall dynamic that our country is far more multicultural in its consumption of entertainment than is completely understood, and then you have a fan base that's multicultural that follows whoever happens to be the Super Bowl halftime entertainment. Let me give you an extreme example of what I'm talking about, Rick. Suppose we went back to the very, very old days of Super Bowl halftime shows where we had dogs chasing frisbees, right?
Or Up with People. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Up with People was better than dogs chasing frisbees, but we really did have, I think.
Well, I could give you an argument of that, but that's.
Yeah. Oh, I want to hear that one. Hey, bring the argument. I want to hear that one. Go ahead. This is fun. This is fun. What is it? Go ahead.
I would just rather watch dogs chasing frisbees than watch how bad that Up with People stuff used to be. But that's just one man's opinion.
See, I think Rick and I are the same generation. We both remember Up with People, but Go CSU, who's watching this, is thinking Up with who? So.
Yeah, well, that's true.
He's 17 years
old. 8 people who say, "Oh yeah, Up with People."
Yeah, he's 17 years old, right? So but it underscores the point. My point is that if the NFL continued with that sort of thing, you would have had a completely different demographic. I would wager, watching.
Oh yeah.
Right?
No question. Yes.
That's what I'm saying. And okay, so let me go with another one. And this goes. And I'm not. And here's the thing. I'm not at all discounting the impact of the anthem protests. I was drilling down that one specific area, and I say that because going into your paragraph about the anthem protests, where you report the national anthem, stand or kneel, remains a matter of interest to the public, with 27% approving a player protest during the playing of the anthem at the start of the Super Bowl, and 44% disapproving, with 25% having no opinion. And you continue to write, the question was also asked of regular season viewing to see if the higher profile of the Super Bowl mattered, and it was a similar breakdown. These numbers...
Yeah, almost identical.
Yeah, you said these numbers are consistent with previous polls dating back to September of 2016. Let me ask you, do you think that this has sounded a death knell for the NFL in terms of viewership? In other words, they're just gone and they're never going to come back?
No, I don't think that's the case. I think people might be disillusioned, angry, bitter, whatever the word, whichever side of the argument that they're coming out on. But those in my lifetime, those things tend to kind of go away. I think this is a story that has the whole anthem protest situation has been given legs by the attention that was focused on it by the president. He decided to go to war against the players and I guess the owners as well. And that made what might have been a much quieter storm into a raging conflagration. But I think that I think that people will, if they're angry and they're saying, I've had it, I'm not interested, I'm not watching, I believe they'll come back.
Hey, also, I'm curious how much, and I know this wasn't in your survey, but to me, it's a question that should be asked. And if my friend Lee Steinberg were to listen to this, which he is going to at some point in the future, he would probably say, hey, how much of this disinterest in the Super Bowl and the NFL that you point out has to do with such news as, for example, the concussion controversy?
I think that's a factor. I think there's people who are who are turned off by football because of the potential injury and the devastating brain damage reports that we're hearing. I think that's a real problem. I equated it this afternoon. I did an interview with somebody, and I equated it to boxing, where boxing many years ago was one of the most popular sports in America, primetime television, network television, and then it kind of went back into a little bit of a niche sport, and primarily because it was simply perceived as too violent. And it never really recovered. It certainly never recovered the popularity of the old days. So, I think that's a real danger looming and a lesson looming for football. I think, football is the NFL, I should say. I shouldn't say football. The NFL is trying to address the issue of safety, but, it would appear unsuccessfully to this point.
You made me think of something along those lines, because Zennie62 is because I was born in 1962, August 4th. I call that year the greatest year ever because, among other things, we had Marilyn Monroe, the Rolling Stones' first concert, the publishing of The Silent Spring, which launched the environmental movement, and the birth of the term, the personal computer. I can go on and on and on and on. And then, of course, I was born. But the whole point is that but the Giants lost the World Series, so that to me, that was a bummer. I'm sorry, but I'm curious. My hero, in fact, he held me in his arms when I was but 2 years old, is Muhammad Ali, and I pay attention to Ali not because of his boxing, but to put it in context. Rick, I grew up in South Chicago. And Ali was a fixture there. And he had his political protest, and that's how I became. That was one way, not among others, that I became, if you will, politicized, right? But Ali boxed through that, and that's how I became aware of boxing. But my lens of boxing was through Ali. So when Ali stopped, I became disinterested. Is the NFL making a mistake by not having, for example, Colin Kaepernick play, even with the attention, positive and negative, he draws, because perhaps then they could draw or attract the kind of fan that would be interested in Colin and rooting for him based on that?
I think there's a school of thought. Well, it's a twofold question, I guess. First of all, should he be playing? And the answer, in my mind, to that is, of course, he should. Somebody should have signed him.
Yeah.
But are they losing a potential draw, or however we say it, potential idol? I think the attitude. And I'm not really suggesting collusion. I'm just sort of suggesting a basically universal avoidance of Kaepernick because he's a lightning rod now, because of the attention that he would get. I think this is my conjecture, but I certainly think there's a possibility that if he played, lots of people would be really interested and really supportive. I mean, look, our poll said 27% of people approve of protests for the anthem, 44% disapprove. I mean, it's not that big a difference. So as many people would say, I won't watch because he's playing, many people would say, hey, he's my guy.
Yeah.
When Ali refused to be drafted and was stripped of his title and essentially made an outlaw, it didn't hurt his popularity any.
No.
He came back more popular than ever as a boxer. But in that interim period where he wasn't fighting and sort of was fighting for his life, in essence, he became much more of a national figure. I mean, I don't know that he became more popular, but he very well might have.
Yeah, I would argue, just from memory, that he did, because I strictly remember a kind of a split within the black community at the time in America. And if you were for Joe Frazier, you were for staying in your lane, not causing trouble. If you were for Ali, you were for change, you were for civil rights. And it really came down, it came down to that, fascinatingly. But
it's always historically been a little unfair to Joe Frazier, but
yes,
you're right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. It has been very unfair to Joe Frazier. You're absolutely right. And I don't think Ali, well, of course, I think you and I would agree if I say that Ali didn't help the matter by, calling him all kinds of names, right?
Right. Which he really was felt bad about later in life. Mm-hmm. I knew Ali a little bit in my previous life when I was at CBS, and
okay.
And I think he genuinely felt bad about that aspect of his relationship with Joe Frazier.
Hey,
who was a very, very decent guy.
I want to take a little momentary aside. What did you do at CBS in your other life? I think that's fascinating. Go ahead.
I was executive producer. I was in charge of production at CBS Sports. So everything that we put on the air was sort of under my auspices. Mm-hmm. And I started in CBS, apropos of our conversation. I started as the researcher for our boxing series. So I was very much involved with boxing for about 5 or 6 years. Where we were doing a lot of boxing on the network. I was the guy who was acquiring the fights and doing research for them and going to every fight, working with the on-air talent, et cetera, et cetera. So boxing was very much a part of my life.
Did you have an opportunity, did you produce NFL games during that time?
Yes.
What was that experience like?
Really not unlike any other sport, honestly. It's you're aware of the fact that probably there's more people watching, certainly a Super Bowl. But it's not a whole lot different than any other sport.
Was that during the time that Pat Summerall was?
Summerall and Madden. Yeah,
Summerall and Madden. Right. I call it, and they people call CBS jokingly the Cowboys broadcasting system.
Yeah. Well, they were America's team.
They were. That's right. I was a huge Dallas Cowboys fan when Tom Landry was the coach, and
the attitude was whenever you couldn't, you used to send a game into every market, all 210 TV markets in the country, and when you were in doubt as to what game to send to whatever Dothan, Alabama, or Cape Girardeau, Arkansas, or whatever, or Missouri rather, you would say, well, if we can't figure out what game naturally goes there, give them the Cowboys. You can't go wrong if you give them the Cowboys.
Is there a team today, in your view, that equals, and this is a great conversation because we can, bring together the generations. Is there a team today that equals the Cowboys' drawing power back then?
No, but the Patriots are this generation's Cowboys. This is, I guess, the combination of Belichick's, Darth Vader thing and Brady. I think there's that would be the team, the team that you would tend to send to the markets when there's no natural game to bring.
Oh, by the way,
but certainly not to the degree that the Cowboys were popular back in the day.
Yeah, they were huge. And just out of respect for your time, how much time do I have with you? Because I want to go into talking about the XFL, but you have a rich background.
As much as you want. I'm having fun.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Oh, this is great. Because I also want to talk about when were you with CBS doing these games from when to when?
The early 80s to the late 90s.
Oh, wow. So you went from as we jokingly called it, the Cowboys broadcasting system to the rise of the San Francisco 49ers, right?
Oh, yeah, and through that period, yes, and the Steelers.
And the Steelers. And so over that time, do you think that the NFL, how would you think, do you think the NFL was caught flat-footed by the change in the decline of let me just say it another way. Is the NFL prepared for a post-cable future?
I think they're preparing. I think that goes back to what we said before about finding a sort of a streaming partner that they can, with a place that the games can live. But yeah, I think the NFL has always been the most progressive. It sounds like a little bit of an oxymoron, but they've always been the most progressive of all the professional sports leagues. They've done everything first. They figured out how to have a national broadcast contract. They figured out merchandising. They figured out marketing. And I suspect that they are on top of it, whether to what degree they can anticipate, whether it's over the top or whatever, whatever new way of what, Hulu or, whatever it is. I think I would guess they're on it. I would guess that they've done analysis of the marketplace, and the fact that again Fox is willing to pay, I don't even remember the number, $600+ million a year for Thursday Night Football. Their modus operandi has always been, there's always another network out there that we can get a lot of money from.
Interesting.
So I think the answer to the question is, I suspect they are ready. I don't think they'll be caught flat-footed. I think they'll always be anticipating where the next big media deal is, and they'll probably make it.
I'm going to get a few comments in here from my viewers. Paul Dog says, first of all, Bad Mexican Cinema says, I don't think the Pats have the same broad appeal now the boys had back then, as you were saying. And then Paul Dog,
I agree.
Paul Dog says their fans also don't travel like the Steelers and the Browns in Green Bay. Think Green Bay is the new Cowboys. That's interesting. What do you think about that? Because my observation is that the Steelers fans travel well. There's a myth. The Raiders are trying to build themselves into a global brand, but they say that they're there now. And having worked in CBS and then having been able to view the league from the perspective that you have now, do you think that this whole idea of the Raiders, I'll use that example because right now it's a gigantic argument. Are the Raiders really a global brand?
Not in my mind, they're not. I mean, I think I agree. The Raiders do have over the years have traveled. Fans have traveled. I mean, I remember going to a Super Bowl in San Diego, and I don't know what year it was.
2003.
Yeah, okay.
Because I was there.
Staying in a hotel somewhere, wherever I was in San Diego, and it was just filled with Raiders fans, and I was just amazed by it. San Diego's not so far away, but that they would travel in bunches and rent out an entire hotel. And maybe they're a global brand. I don't really know, but I don't think that in this day and age anything rivals what we saw in those days of the Cowboys. And it's more of to me, it was more of a television phenomenon than anything else. They were just extremely popular. Whenever we would play a Cowboy game in a market, the ratings would go up. Again in a neutral market. The ratings were higher for the Cowboys than any other team, and it wasn't even a contest.
No, it wasn't. So, no, you're right. You're right.
I don't see anybody rivaling that right now, but that doesn't mean they won't.
Is that a testament to Cowboys' popularity more to the fact that we had fewer TV channels and the Cowboys were winning, or was it more Tex Schramm, who was the marketing genius of the time of the Cowboys, and the president? I mean, because you had Gil Brandt, a person who I know personally is a great guy. I had the pleasure of meeting Tex Schramm at my first Super Bowl in Atlanta. And then, of course, I had the pleasure of meeting Tom Landry way back in, it was 1996, 7. But I'm curious to, what your take on that is. Is it a matter of fewer TVs, fewer television channels?
Yes. Yeah, I think there's fewer options. Not even just television, video games, just general entertainment opportunities. football on Sundays was king, and there were fewer days of football. I mean, the days of the Cowboys' dominance, which was in the 70s and 80s. There was Monday night football. There wasn't Sunday night. There wasn't Thursday night. So if you wanted to watch football, you watched Sunday afternoon and Monday night.
Yep.
And so that alone condensed the package a little. I mean, I think it was a bit of their marketing genius, and it was also obviously their success. Mm-hmm. And they had some really compelling players, whether it was Roger Staubach or I'm drawing blanks on all the players.
Tony Dorsett, Drew Pearson.
Right.
Right. Oh my God,
Tom Smith. I mean,
here you go.
There was one guy, even going into Troy Aikman. I mean, they just had great players, really interesting, compelling players, and of course, great success.
So here goes my Cowboys memory from the 70s going to the 80s. Roger Staubach at quarterback, Drew Pearson wide receiver, Tony Hill at flanker, Tony Dorsett at halfback, Roger Newhouse at fullback, Tom Rafferty at guard, Rayfield Wright at left tackle, Tom Fitzgerald, who was the center, and I believe Blaine Nye at guard, and missed one. I missed the right tackle. So,
well, you're better than me. I'm too old to remember all that stuff. Lance Rensel, there's a name.
Yeah, there you go.
My head.
Yeah, last one. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, look, we all remember those great players because they were in Super Bowls, they were in championship games. The rivalry with whether it's the Steelers in the other league or the Packers, or it's just those are great days. Or the Vikings. Mm-hmm. Those, of course, we always romanticize the good old days, but it was a different world because, again, we were watching football on all day on Sunday, and then there was Monday night, and that was great, but there wasn't, the oversaturation hadn't happened.
So I think we're painting an overall picture of a time when, because there were fewer channels and the NFL was entertaining, it was the first reality TV of its kind other than boxing, right? Sports, right? But
yeah.
But it sounds like now the very structured media may very well be threatening the NFL's popularity. Is that fair to say?
As it has with every other sport.
Mm-hmm.
The NFL isn't unique in that. The NFL has been unique of late because they were immune to it. It didn't affect them. And now, starting really last year, it's hit home a little bit. And again, I just go back to what we said at the beginning, that protest, head injury, too many games on television, not enough really good teams, no Cowboys, not enough good teams to make enough compelling matchups that it's must-see TV. I think that's what's gotten lost.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, because I remember this year, the NFL kickoff game was the Patriots versus the Chiefs, and I thought, why would they make, of all the games, that game the kickoff game? Who wants to watch that? And then on top of that...
Yeah, Super Bowl champions against a team that everybody at the beginning of the year thought was going to be one of the dominant teams in the league, I guess, in Kansas City. But yeah, I mean, I remember too many Sundays looking at the schedule saying, I don't really care about any of these games.
Yeah, no. Hey, a Bad Mexican Cinema has a question. He says, do you think if the number of TV days broadcast, I guess he means, let me rephrase that because he, I believe what he's asking is, and Bad Mexican Cinema, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're asking if the number of TV broadcasts were changed, would it make a difference in terms of viewership?
I think it would. I think if there were, fewer exposures, as I said, the Sunday night, and Thursday night, plus all day Sunday, to me is a little too much. And not only that, but in trying to maximize the viewership on the primetime games, Sunday, Monday, Thursday, it negatively impacts the Sunday games where the NFL has always lived. So, yes, in my mind, if you reduce the number of windows, you would probably increase viewership. Having said that, the money that's brought in as a result of those primetime games, the rights fees that are paid by the networks, ESPN for Monday night and NBC for Sunday night, and now Fox for Thursday night, that money is so overwhelming that we're not going back.
Hey, so Paul Dog has a great question. He asks, this goes back to your CBS days, did the NFL dictate your coverage? If there were scandals, did they ask you to hide them?
Never. They never asked us to do anything. The only thing that they would ever be critical of after the fact is if they thought that one of our announcers unfairly criticized a referee.
Really?
They never told us don't cover a fight or whatever. There was no protest at that time in the NFL at least. But they never dictated coverage. But they did say I would get a call on Monday saying, whoever, let's say John Madden, that we thought John Madden was a little bit too critical of a call, that it wasn't that bad a call or whatever. Which I always felt was their right to say. They were protecting their guys.
Mm-hmm.
But no, they never dictated coverage ever.
Wow, that's headline news right there. And there, Paul Dog, you asked a fantastic. That's the question of the week, by the way. I might that's an excellent question. And Paul Dog has an even better follow-up question. He asked, "Do you believe that they do that now?"
I don't know. I doubt it. I think if they did that now, we'd know about it. It's hard to keep a secret,
Yeah.
It's not like it's between two people. It's you would see on a blog somewhere that the NFL dictated. I don't believe they do. I believe that they had conversations with networks. And I'm guessing here about the protest. Can you not cover? Can you not pan the sidelines when the players are protesting? But even that, generally speaking, the anthem isn't covered during a regular season game for the most part. It happens during a commercial or whatever. We always used to bury the anthem. We called it burying the anthem. We would find out what time they're going to play the anthem, and we would make sure in commercial. That's the only thing I could say is that there might have been some collaboration as to how to handle that.
Mm-hmm. I have to ask you out of curiosity, what do you remember? Let me put it this entirely other way. Jimmy the Greek, I always enjoyed hearing, but I was really disappointed, at what happened with him. But to me, and this is an entirely other take on Jimmy the Greek, it was one of the first primary examples of how powerful a pundit could be on television other than Howard Cosell. Because everyone tuned in to listen to him. And,
yeah, I guess.
I don't know. What do you think about that? Is that,
Well, I think people were interested because he was, just think of how different it was. He was a professional gambler, basically, who had a window on network television. We would not allow him to discuss point spreads on the air. That was something that was taboo. And that was in conjunction with the NFL. The NFL was always sort of against discussing gambling. Still is, for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
It's a subject that's a sore subject to the NFL. We all know how many people bet on football games.
Yeah.
And yet it's never discussed. But the Greek used to not pick games by point spread. He would talk in code. He would say, I like the Packers big this week. And that meant to cover. I think the Giants will eke out a victory against the Steelers meant they wouldn't cover if they were favored. Obviously, they would not cover. So he had his way of letting the people out there know what he thought was going to happen in terms of point spreads. The Greek had a following for sure.
You said something that opened another door to another question I didn't anticipate asking because I was about to move into Vince McMahon. But I have to ask, given that the Raiders are trying to move to Las Vegas, and as my viewers know, the Raiders are not going to be able to open their stadium in 2020 for a host of reasons that I've covered on this show. But I'm curious given what you said about the NFL and its tenuous relationship with gambling, how do you think, if the Raiders are able to succeed in locating in Las Vegas, their being in Las Vegas will impact the whole issue of viewership, given that Las Vegas is smaller than the Bay Area and there's the gambling issue? Is there something there that we may be missing?
No, I don't think there is. I think I think the Raiders are hoping that, as you said it before, that they're a big enough brand so that they can deal with the fact that they're playing in a smaller market. Mm-hmm. I think the league assumes that there won't be any fall off in viewership because of their location in Vegas, but it's a risk. Moving from a bigger market to a smaller market is a risk. And as far as the gambling aspect, that's always going to be something people are going to be watching. I don't know whether there'll be more. If a guy drops a pass, is there somebody going to say, obviously, he's got a bet on the game? Who knows? There's always that aspect of it where people are looking for that kind of association. But and I think that's a risk. I do. I think it's a risk.
Now, I want to get to, since I developed a game called the XFL SimWorld back in 2005 with my other company, the XFL part of your poll, which goes like this: XFL finally, wrestling mogul Vince McMahon's plans to bring back his Pro Football League in 2020, the XFL, attracted interest in following by 27% of the public in the poll. And while 61% said they had no interest, 47% of people who identified as NFL fans said they were interested. And this is a quote: "There seems to be a respectable starting point for McMahon's plan." This is what you were saying. Does that, in your view, equate to an automatic hit for the for the XFL? And I'd like for you to put your TV producer experience hat on too, and talk to me about how you would forecast how the XFL is going to do this time around.
Well, honestly, I don't think they'll do very well. If they get too gimmicky, I think it'll be, it could get it almost like last time, where the first couple of weeks there was interest, and it just dropped like a rock after that. And honestly, I think it's too early, and he was too vague about what this league is going to be. He talked about games will be shorter. It was like, everything anybody's ever complained about the NFL, I'm going to fix. It's not going to be soft. It's going to be more extreme than current NFL, but safer. I don't know what any of that means. No, honestly, I just don't know what any of that means. So it's hard to tell what this thing is going to look like. But my gut is, look, I've lived through a number of wannabe NFLs, the USFL and the XFL, and they just don't go anywhere. They just don't go anywhere. The last time a league could actually compete was when the AFL started in 1960, they had some great players. They drafted some great players. They went to a draft war with the NFL, and they had compelling teams. And even then, they ended up folding into the NFL. A merger of sorts, but basically they folded in.
Do you think?
My gut is no, but who knows?
Do you think it would make a difference depending on what cities they went into? The XFL.
Yes and no. I mean, if they try to put a team in New York because it's the biggest market, it'll be the third team. Do we really want another team? Now, it starts in January, and there's not much going on in January or in February. Once the NFL season ends, you've got NBA and college basketball, but not much else going on. I guess it'll depend. I guess it could be a factor which markets they go into. But I see this more as a television league than a live league. I don't see this as they're going to sell out 80,000 seat stadiums. I think what they're looking for is a couple of rating points so they can sell some advertising.
Paul Dog has an interesting observation. He thinks that the best future for the XFL, if I read his comment correctly, is as a minor league of a sort, to the NFL, which I've heard bandied about back and forth, by
a development type league, but college football does a pretty good job of that.
They sure do, don't they? You're absolutely right about that. And it's if you were. Let me ask this from another perspective then, because I'm really fascinated with the fact that you are a producer during the NFL's sweet spot in success, arguably from a broadcast standpoint. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think it was sort of the golden age. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, the NFL's been successful from the early 60s on, and really right through. It is not just the most successful sport, it's the most successful entertainment entity in the history of the medium. But yeah, we had the 80s, 70s and 80s and even into the 90s. Yes, it was the glory days, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree that it was the glory days. Absolutely. How would you compare, I've known both men, but NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell to NFL Commissioner Paul Tagliabue? And I give you a perspective. When I pitched the Super Bowl to Oakland, Roger Goodell was the executive vice president for football operations. And I met him in 96 because I was the economic advisor to LII Harris, the mayor of Oakland. And then he became commissioner later, just after I pitched the Super Bowl, and I still know him to this day because now I cover the NFL. But I'm curious your take on the difference between the men.
I think Tagliabue is less of a media lightning rod, if that's the right way of saying it. Goodell has, whether Roger has just sort of stumbled on some times when he couldn't hide from the media, but he made a series of controversial calls. I think the domestic abuse kind of thing bit him in the butt. Certainly the Kaepernick protest bit him in the butt. Tagliabue, I don't remember going through that kind of controversy.
No.
But so to me, and I was around when I was gone from CBS by the time Goodell took over, so I was familiar with Paul Tagliabue and his staff. I worked pretty closely with a lot of his staff.
Did you know Dennis Lewin by chance?
Did I know who?
Dennis Lewin?
Oh, sure. I worked with Dennis Lewin when I first started in television.
Yeah, he
was at ABC Sports.
One of the great guys. I met him when he was with the league. I met him on the elevator at Super Bowl.
Yeah, brilliant man. Man. Fabulous producer. One of the most intelligent guys I ever met in my life. But anyway, I dealt with a lot of those guys, and it was the absolute most first-class operation that you ever saw. And I think that, by the way, was dictated by Pete Rozelle, who to me was the greatest commissioner of all time in any sport. Brilliant, visionary, and set the tone. And I think Tagliabue really created an incredible operation. The NFL was just nobody competed with the NFL in any aspect. And now I think it's not quite as at least perceptibly, it's not quite as first class.
And I'm curious now. It's this is an interesting question by Wiggle Babies, and he asks, "What do you think of Major League Soccer?" He says it's expanding immensely and about to be 28 teams once they announce the expansion team this month. He wants to know what you see, where you see the NMLS in the future of sports in America.
Well, we alluded to it before. I think soccer is growing, sort of generally speaking, or I should say, interest in soccer is growing in this country. greater contribution to the World Cup that Fox made. Of course, I'm sure they'd be much happier if the American team made the World Cup. But I think there's a major investment, which is always the way you can sort of tell how much interest they think is being generated. When the networks start spending big money, then you think, oh my God, they're up to something. They know something. It generally means advertisers are interested, and advertisers have a pretty good finger on the pulse of the American public. So I think soccer is growing. I think many people, including myself, are surprised that it's taken this long. It's the most popular sport in the world by so far. That I think it is getting more and more interest. I think still the coverage of international soccer is probably even a little more popular than MLS, but I think MLS is growing.
And
one of my favorite stats is that the viewership for every single match in the World Cup. So if Latvia is playing, I'm making this up, Ghana.
Sure, right.
That match gets greater viewership worldwide than the Super Bowl. Every single match in the World Cup has more people watching it than the Super Bowl.
Holy cow. Say that one more time, please.
So, yeah, every single match in the World Cup, worldwide audience, has a bigger audience worldwide than the Super Bowl.
Wow.
We're so parochial in this country that we think the Super Bowl, that's the biggest sporting event in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so not.
Yeah, you're right. I remember when it looks like we had a chance and the bars all over the Bay Area were full and people were just excited, and it was hard to just sometimes get a parking space to go to a place you wanted to watch the games, and you're absolutely right about that. But then, Rick, it does beg the question, how much borrowed time does the NFL have? Because we have this growing number of market economies around the world, and then you have airplanes like the 787 that can take us from Denver to Tokyo, and use fuel efficiently. With the world brought together as it is, how much time does the NFL have to survive?
I think that's why you're seeing the NFL playing more games in London and Mexico City and and elsewhere. I think they're constantly probing to see if they can sort of break through internationally, and they have success on a sort of one-off basis. They could sell out Wembley Stadium in London, but is the NFL as big in England as soccer, as football is? American football is not any rival of football in anywhere else but in this country.
Yeah.
So it really is very much an American phenomenon, more so than the NBA, for instance, which is a worldwide success,
mm-hmm.
much more so than the NFL. Major League Baseball, certainly in Latin America and Japan and Korea, has great success, but the NFL is really a U.S.-based phenomenon.
You mentioned the NBA and basketball, and I have to ask, because what's fascinating to me is when Tillman Fertitta bought the Houston Rockets, I believe, for $2.2 billion. Now, the Rockets are not a lot, but just a little bit north of the lower tier of NFL teams in total in terms of value. Does that reflect, and then if you think about the Warriors at $3 billion, I think $3.5 billion, does that reflect
mm-hmm.
the NBA coming up to equal the NFL in terms of media popularity, or is that?
It's not equal, but it's growing. It's with everybody else dropping, the NBA is getting, is doing well. And really interesting players. And just think about it. If you watch an NBA game, there's only 5 guys on the court of the team you're rooting for. You could actually see their faces.
Yeah.
you actually know what LeBron James looks like. There's very few football players who you could say, I know what he looks like.
That's true.
Tom Brady's face is plastered all over every television set, but But other than that, it's and Colin Kaepernick for very different reasons. But the NBA, you know what these guys look like, because when you watch a game, you see their faces.
Rick, you hit on right, absolutely right. I want to share this because I think you hit on a major problem. I've covered the NFL draft since 2005. I covered it. I'm the first to cover it with a YouTube channel in 2006. In 2010, the NFL started the red carpets, and what got me was, look, I don't know what every player looks like, but they didn't have a photograph for me to, say, one player from the other. I got 80% of them, but I think you hit upon a major problem. How does the NFL get around that? Because a lot of the players, you don't know what they look like.
They don't. They'll never get around it unless guys start playing without helmets. They won't. That's why the league tries to market the star players. And, but it's just, first of all, there's 11 guys on the field. You're farther away from them. They're wearing protective padding and helmets. There's no way of getting around it. They just have to. That's something that they've always had to deal with. And in this day and age, when with YouTube, with Facebook, with Twitter, where people want to have a dialogue with players, it's easy to do that with guys who you sort of can picture in your mind, who you can you know what they look like. Football is always going to have that problem.
Hey, there's another question that occurs to me, and this is, I think, right up your bailiwick. Formula One announced yesterday, I believe, that they're going to stop the women models that were at the pit stops, right? And I was thinking about that in the context of the hue and cry on social media about this, particularly from women who were saying, hey, wait a minute, if I want a model, that's fine. But I was thinking of in terms of what's next. Do we say no more cheerleaders in the NFL? And then I thought about it. I thought about college football in the days when I was watching the NFL. We had the Cowboys cheerleaders. And are we getting to a point now where, let me put it, that wasn't the question I was going to ask. The question I was going to ask is this. Does that threaten viewership when you take away cheerleaders from the game and you take that out? Like college football,
I think it would. Yeah. I think it would. I think there's the pageantry. College football in particular, because the cheerleaders are a little bit different. It's a different feel. Let's say there's a wholesomeness to a college cheerleader that might not be the same as the cowboy cheerleaders or whatever. But who are really professional dancers. I guess that's the easiest way of saying it.
Yeah.
I think it would take away a little, and I'm sensitive to the argument that it's exploitive and all that.
Absolutely,
and
right.
Probably it is. But it is part of the fabric of the game. We're kind of used to it. We didn't have cheerleaders before the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders in professional football. If there were any, they certainly weren't as high profile. And then after the success that Dallas had, then every team started to have their dancing squad or whatever.
Right.
But really, that was another marketing move by our friends in Dallas.
That was Tech Schramm, Texas.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, Tech Schramm. Right. I have to say this is a momentary aside. Jerry Jones. It took me a long time to get over how he treated Tom Landry, and he's since come through. And he pointed out that Dallas Cowboys losing, I think, something like $1 million a month. But lost in all that was the fact that separate, and I'd love your comment on this. I think separate from Pete Rozelle, Texas Schramm had a lot to do with the modern NFL as we know it today. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he was the sort of where Rozelle was the sort of league-wide marketing genius. He was a marketing guy from the Rams when he took the job as commissioner. I think Texas, in a similar way, was that way with his team, with an individual team, and they were often at cross purposes. The Cowboys and the NFL. The Cowboys wanted the ability to market themselves, sell their own merchandise, and the league held on to the collective rights. So, but yes, I do think he, in a very similar way, he did for the Cowboys what Rizzo did for the NFL.
Hey, did you ever have an opportunity to meet Al Davis?
Yeah, sure, yes.
What was he like?
Interesting guy. Interesting guy. A little crazy, maybe a lot crazy. Tough, direct, no bullshit. Am I allowed to say that on YouTube?
Yeah, you are.
But, obviously brilliant in his way. And, I found him to be, I'm a New York guy, so, he was a New York guy. So to me, he was a kindred spirit in a sense. But I found him to be a fascinating guy.
Do you remember your first encounter with Mr. Davis?
Probably, I would guess at a Raiders game somewhere, and he would come down to the truck, to our the TV truck. He if we were doing a big game in Oakland, and Madden was there, he would always come and see John. They were good buddies, I'm sure you know. So, I can't really remember the first time, but it might have been at a Super Bowl and at the commissioner's party or something.
Yeah, those are fun parts. So you've been to, wait, how many Super Bowls have you been to?
Oh, God, I have no idea. A dozen, maybe more. I haven't been in a while, and I don't really miss it, just because it's become so difficult to get from point A to point B, and the security and all that. But I probably have been to a dozen or so.
It's interesting you say that, because I remember my first Super Bowl was Titans-Rams 2000, and then my second Super Bowl was 2003 in San Diego. And between the Titans-Rams Super Bowl and the Raiders-Bucks Super Bowl was 9/11. And that was, as you remember,
security changed.
Exactly. Precisely. And then the NFL just put out a communique on the NFL media website I meant to put out, but I didn't get a chance to. But I'm curious to get your thought about how that, or not your thought, but your recollection of how the Super Bowl was before security, because you said it was a little harder to get to. I'd like to hear what you mean by that.
It was just a big football game. It was, but that's not so unique to the Super Bowl. Final Four is the same way, with security having tightened up, and the Final Fours are now played in dome stadiums all the time, big stadiums. So, in a very similar way, it's that's something that affects everything, every sporting event, every big gathering. Going to a Rolling Stone concert was a lot easier before 9/11.
That's true.
It was just, life was different.
Oh, hey, got some questions here, some good ones. Bad Mexican Cinema, I love this one. He wants to know what your most memorable Super Bowl was.
That I went to?
Yeah.
I would have to say the Giants beating Buffalo on the missed field goal was one of the most exciting, certainly. I can't really remember. People ask me things like this all the time, and I've been to so many thousands of sporting events. Like I have a neighbor here who's a big sports fan who'll say, "So you were at the whatever? I'll make it up. The 1993 World Series." Yeah, I did that World Series. I was executive producer. So do you remember the play that the second baseman made in the seventh inning of Game 4? No. Absolutely not. No. But anyway, I do remember that Buffalo Giants game. I guess it was in Tampa, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's right.
I could be wrong.
Yeah.
And it was a great game and a really exciting finish. And I'm not really a Giant fan. That part of it didn't interest me all that much. But the fact that Super Bowls were kind of famous, if you remember, for being sort of anticlimactic. There was a string of years where they were so boring.
They were blowouts. The blowouts.
Oh yeah, blowouts and non-contests. Yeah, and that game was close and compelling, and I remember thinking, it's fortunate. I've been to a dozen Super Bowls. I've probably been to about 5 or 6 more where I left the morning of the game and got home in time to watch it.
Yeah.
I would go down for the various meetings and gatherings and parties and whatnot, and get in the plane Sunday morning so I could be home in time to watch the game.
Yeah, I did that. I did that in New York when we had Super Bowl in New York. That's exactly what I did. I gave my tickets away.
Good move.
Thank you. Hey, quick question. Another one. My Paul Dog wants to know if you met Lamar Hunt, the late great Lamar Hunt.
No, I never met Lamar Hunt. No, but I always admired him because he was a guy who wanted to be an NFL owner. And the NFL basically said, no, go away. And he started in his own league and, with remarkable success.
Wow.
Another visionary who said, okay, here's what we're going to do. And not only that, he was a revolutionary in that when they started the AFL in 1960, they made a network broadcast deal and split the proceeds, which the NFL tried to do the same year and was told by the federal government that they couldn't do it.
Really?
That it would be in restraint of trade, yeah.
Huh.
That they were considered, NFL teams were considered competitors and therefore couldn't split the network money. They had to have an act of Congress a year later that allowed them to do it under the Kennedy administration. But Lamar Hunt did it below the radar because who was paying attention to the AFL?
Right.
And it was, of course, the model that we now all see as the only model that could possibly exist.
Oh my goodness. My memory of Lamar Hunt is I did meet him. He was one of 5 gentlemen who was in the room for my Super Bowl policy committee presentation of Oakland's bid for the Super Bowl. And what happened, Rick, was that this was November 3rd of 1999 was my first NFL owners meeting, and originally we were supposed to give our presentation on the 2nd of November at 5:30 in the afternoon. But what happened was that originally I was supposed to give the presentation November 3rd at 7:30 in the morning. But what happened was that Walter Payton died that Monday. And that the meeting was at the Chicago, Hyatt Regency Chicago, by the airport there. And I got a call from Jim Steig. I don't know if you had a chance to meet Jim. Probably did. Yeah, Jim Steig, great guy.
Sure.
Mr. Super Bowl. Formal title for the formal title, folks, was the NFL's senior vice president for special events. Right now, that mantle belongs to Peter Riley, who I just got an email from earlier today. But I digress. Anyway, I got a call from Jim saying, "Hey, Zennie, is your team here?" And I said, "Well, it's me right now." And the team was supposed to be myself, Oakland then city manager Robert Bobb, Alameda County Supervisor Gail Steele, and Oakland Councilman Larry Reed. Anyway, they said, "Well, Walter Payton's died, and the owners want to go home. Can you do your presentation at 5:30?" And I'm thinking, holy cat. It's just me, right? I had all my panels and everything else. And Jim said, well, look, here's the deal. You can either do the meeting with all the Super Bowl Policy Committee members this afternoon, or you can do it with just me tomorrow. So I called Robert Bobb. I called Gail Steele, and Gail says, no, they're doing it to us. They're screwing us like Major League Baseball tried to screw us in Cooperstown with the A's, and we had another controversy with that. I said, no, Gail, I don't really think it's that, okay? So then I called Robert. Robert said, Zennie, can you do it? I said, yeah, I can do it in my sleep. So I went in. I gave my pitch, starting with my tagline, which was that Oakland is America's shining city on a hill, the best example for the Super Bowl. And after I finished, we talked about our advertising, our advantage in terms of being a media giant and from a demographic standpoint and all that. And after I finished, there was Jim Irsay, Neil Austrian, who you might have met. He was the chief operator. Right. Neil Austrian, Jim Irsay, Jim Steig, Lamar Hunt, and who am I leaving out? At any rate, myself. But at any rate, afterward, both Jim Irsay and Mr. Hunt said that was an outstanding presentation, and Lamar Hunt will be a 3x5 note later that made me cry, because the city of Oakland, as me and my viewers know, really treated me like crap. They didn't believe we could get the Super Bowl. Jerry Brown was the mayor, and he put no stock into it until we started getting press. And so my recollection, not only did he do that, Rick, but Jim Irsay, who remembers this to this day, picked up one of my bags, and Lamar Hunt picked up the other. and we were talking about and I think Mr. Hunt was saying something like, "So what are we gonna do? We're gonna be on a yacht. And he was joking around about where they were gonna watch the game or who's gonna beat whom. It was kind of an interesting little code talk, and they were talking about also Peter Warwick, because I think Peter Warwick was coming up in the draft, right? And that was a really cool cemented moment in time for me. You know what I mean? It was just about how the NFL family works, and I think how it works to a degree to this day. You know what I mean? So that's what I remember about Mr. Hunt. I mean, and I think you'll probably agree with this, is that when you're part of the NFL family, you remain that. I don't know what you think about that or not. You know?
Yeah, I think that's very true. Those guys, it's a little bit of a boys' club, obviously. It's a nice little billionaires club. But yeah, I think to a degree that's true. That people, look, I just saw a thing today about, that Donald Trump has a grudge against the NFL because he was not allowed to, he wanted to buy a team and they wouldn't let him. Mm-hmm. Several times, and was part of the USFL when it happened, and whatever that was. Yeah, I think it's true. I think you're an NFL person for life.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely the case. Hey, so I want to be respectful of your time because it's almost 11 o'clock. Actually, it is 11. And
yeah, it's getting past my bedtime.
Yeah, there you go. So hey, I want to have you back again, and we can just talk about the changing. I like to talk about the changing nature of sports broadcasting. If we could do that,
sure.
That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, let me know. I'd love to chat.
You got it. Yeah, definitely. And folks, I'm going to say thank you all very much. Rick, stick around off, and I'll wrap up with you off camera. But folks, I want to thank everybody for watching. There will be a live stream tomorrow, and Paul Dog and Rob Byman, you're there, and everybody. And I'm going to have a live stream tomorrow, 8 o'clock Eastern. Rick Saratella, my buddy from the NFL Draft Bible. We're going to talk about how the New England Patriots and the Philadelphia Eagles were formed. And then he's going to talk about his top picks at this point in time for the 2018 NFL Draft. So tomorrow, 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific, special Super Bowl live stream, because we don't usually do this on Saturday, but this is a special week. All right, everybody. And Rick, stick around, but thank you so very much. And
my
folks,
pleasure. Thank you.
You got it. And folks, subscribe to Zennie62 on YouTube. All right, thanks.